Can we stop a repeat of the Paris shootings here in the UK? Will David Cameron agree to take part in the election debates? And should the Chilcot Report into the Iraq War be published this side of May? All questions for the week ahead. And joining Nick, Jan and Helen this week, Senior Conservative backbencher, former Conservative leadership candidate, David Davis. Welcome to the programme.
Thank you.
Given the nature now of this terrorist threat, 600 British jihadis out in Syria and Iraq, 300 of them have come back. We know that at least one of the French jihadis was trained, probably in the Yemen. Others had links with IS in Iraq, Syria. Don't the security services need more resources and powers?
No, not of itself. They've already been given. We just finished this last week taking another counter-terrorism bill to the House of Commons, giving them powers to restrict access back to the UK from people coming from Syria, and a whole series of other powers as well, which helps their internet penetration and so on. The first thing to say right up front on this, take your question head on, is it's impossible to be absolutely to guarantee everybody's safety. That's the first thing we have to recognise. It's impossible in a free society. It's even impossible in a sort of post-Soviet state with the Chechen rebels.
But you can mitigate the damage if you have more people to follow the bad guys and if you have more listening powers to work out if they're planning an attack.
No, I mean, look at the common denominator between 9/11, Mumbai, 7/7, Lee Rigby and this attack. In every single case, some of the agencies knew something about the people attacking beforehand. The issue is how they use the information they have. They don't have to go and survey you and me and everybody on the panel to be able to know more about them. They need to use the information they've got and focus more closely on the people who are real suspects.
French intelligence was onto the brothers.
And then discounted them.
And then they took it off because they didn't have enough manpower.
Well, that may be the head count of manpower may be an issue.
Well, the French intelligence officer this morning says quite clearly there's a simple problem. There's a lot more of them than there is of us.
Yeah. Well, you're not going to get...
So that's an argument for more resources,
well,
is it not?
It may be an argument for more people. It's not an argument for more powers. There's a distinction there.
Don't you think that your line's becoming very hard to sustain now when we see the random, unpredictable nature that people will think, I'd rather have more powers from the security services than David Davis wondering about my human rights?
The security services already have huge numbers of powers, as you know, as you saw from the Snowden revelations. It did not stop Lee Rigby. It didn't stop 7/7. Didn't even stop 21/7, whatever it was, the failed attack. And none of these things have actually given any more success to the agencies. That's the key point. How do you stop them? How do you actually make sure you stop them? And it's using the information effectively, which has not been done so far.
Will the powers and resources of the security services become more of an issue now?
I think the next government, regardless of what it is, will end up toughening security laws and increasing resources, and it will involve some erosion of civil liberties. Now, this will be portrayed by Liberty and all the rest of it as naive politicians being nobbled by securitocrats. I think the truth is more sincere. People in government are the only people in the country who are completely abreast of the current scale of a terror threat in horrifying detail. And ultimately, as the people who are responsible with making that judgment between liberty and security, it's not ignoble of them, I think, to side or to err on the side of security. And then to be brutally political about it, when you take into account public opinion, which is overwhelmingly on the security side, I think that the trend of where the law is going is pretty clear in the coming years.
I mean, given the challenge that the security services now face and that these people are now back in our midst, there'll be more of them coming. Like the French ones, they're now battle-hardened. They've been trained on some foreign jihadi field. The security budget that this government inherited was $2 billion for the security services. It's now down to $1.88 billion. It's even far. I mean, won't people think if there's anything we should be spending money on at this stage, it's that?
Well, and the Sunday Times have got a story on their front page today saying whatever it is, there are 34 jihadis who they fear have the ability to do in the UK what happened in Paris last week. And it's interesting that Andrew Parker, the Director General of MI5, last week gave a speech saying we need to have more powers. And George Osborne on the BBC sofa the next morning said we will give them whatever resources, by resources he meant financial resources they need. And I think there's a bit of a political consensus that where the agencies need financial resources, if they really need them, they will probably get them. Where the consensus breaks down is what David's talking about, which is further powers. David Cameron is clearly itching to do more but can't because he's being stopped by the Liberal Democrats. And Ed Miliband this morning was saying on new powers, we need to be cautious, very cautious in what we do.
Well, one of the reasons he's saying that, however, is the reason the Snoopers Charter was knocked down wasn't lack of threat at all. It was the almost bogus arguments put up by the Home Office and the agencies made the committee, which included previous heads of the Cabinet Office, really angry that they were just misled by the agencies. So it's not a weakness in the threat perception, it's a weakness in what they're proposing to do that's the problem.
I think there's a real trouble with this issue becoming politicised, because if you look at the amount of money spent versus the lives saved, I mean, thankfully we are in a society where terrorism is extremely rare, and that money has to come from somewhere. Are you going to take money out of the schools budget, the NHS budget, to pay for security? Are you going to take money away from where it would be better spent, frankly? But no one can ever make that argument, because otherwise it becomes implicitly you are responsible for this terrorist attack.
Just to put some things in context, it's clear the Islamist threat is worldwide, and we've concentrated on Paris for obvious natural reasons. But while that was happening, according to Amnesty International, up to 2,000 people were killed by Boko Haram in an attack on a town in Baga in northern Nigeria. A deadly massacre razed the city to the ground, left bodies strewn in the streets. 2,000 people. It puts it all into context.
And even that's a small fraction, actually, of what's actually happened in the past.
I want to move on to Chilcot. Is there any chance we'll get Chilcot this side of the election?
I think so. I mean, yes, I think so. I mean, to put it in context, I and Norman Baker...
We're talking about this long report into
the Iraq inquiry.
Long in the sense of it's been a long time coming.
Yeah, thousands of days, tens of millions of pounds. And I and 2 other MPs, well, actually 13 other MPs, are putting in a bid this week to get a debate in the House of Commons to call on Chilcot to report. Even people who know from inside the system, who know about the Maxwellisation process, are saying this has become ridiculous. Douglas Hurd said earlier this week, this has become a scandal.
So what is holding it up?
I suspect a mixture of Whitehall mandarins not wanting to upset the Americans and American lawyers thinking they can spin this out forever. The Maxwellisation process, the process whereby you write to people and say you are being criticised or you are being referred to.
We must have done that by now.
It's all done. It's all done. It's not a process which gives them a veto. It's a process which informs them and allows them to defend themselves. Full stop. And there's been far more than enough time for that to be concluded. And we started this process in order to be able to know why we made the mistakes we made on the Iraq war. 100,000 plus dead, vast amounts of treasure lost, real disruption in the Middle East. We need to know why we made that mistake. If the reason we made the mistake is to do with the relationship between Britain and America, so be it. That should be put in the public domain, no matter who is embarrassed. And to stop the process because that's getting in the way really is unconscionable.
And given that intervention in the Middle East is still on the agenda, people are saying we should do it, we shouldn't do it, you would want to know, you want to be better informed before you took any decisions.
The Syrian vote, which, I mean, I was one of the leaders of the rebellion on the Syrian vote, and the government was defeated on it. One of the things that people were saying to themselves is, we got this wrong last time, we still don't know why, we're not going to take the chance again.
Right. When will we know, just briefly, when will we know if we are going to get it this side of the election?
Well, I think it's got to be before the end of February, probably before the middle of February to do it properly.
All right. Well, speaking of debates of the election, let's turn to the debates issue. Ed Miliband had something to say about this on the BBC earlier this morning.
If an empty chair represents David Cameron in these debates, so be it. I think these debates need to happen. They're owned by the British people, not owned by David Cameron or by anybody else. I think they should happen, and I think, frankly, the Prime Minister should stop ducking and weaving and trying to avoid these debates. Empty chair, of course, is a delicious prospect for a broadcaster. I've done it myself. Not something quite as high profile as this. Actually, we didn't empty chair. It was, I think, a Labour minister didn't turn up, so we put Peppa Pig on the chair instead. I don't think they'll do that. Is there a slightest chance the broadcasters might do that this time?
I would imagine they would be immensely nervous because an election is covered by all sorts of rules of fairness and balance, so I'd imagine they wouldn't want to do that. No, what is happening here is an absolutely traditional run-up to a television election debate. The insurgent, Ed Miliband, desperately wants them to take place and says that it's a great argument for democracy. The incumbent incumbent, in this case David Cameron, does not want the debates to take place, but doesn't want to appear to be anti-democratic, so needs to come up with a democratic argument. And his democratic argument is we cannot possibly do this without the Greens. It is absolutely absurd that he cares two figs for the Greens. It is about stopping the debates taking place. One of his allies said to me, what we want to create with the Greens in that debate is a democratic borathon where you'll all be bored to death as Natalie Bennett drones on, and that will reduce the impact of Nigel Farage and reduce the impact of Ed Miliband.
Where do we go here from the debates?
Well, I think David Cameron deserves to be hammered for this. I mean, he does. I can totally see, as you say, why he's made the decision. But if he wants to run a presidential-style contest in which the implicit measure is vote for me because I'm very strong, Ed Miliband is very weak, then you cannot start that off by going, but I won't stand next to him because he's a bit scary.
It's quite hard to have a presidential debate, I suppose, a presidential campaign without the debate. Though the Americans didn't have them for 16 years after 1960. It doesn't always follow that these things continue.
David Cameron's only doing what Tony Blair did in '97, when I think John Major offered him out.
Because he thought he was losing too.
Well, he was a zillion points ahead in the opinion polls, and so he had no incentive to go ahead and...
So Major was up for a debate, but Blair wasn't.
But Blair had no reason to do it, and so he successfully avoided one. It should also be said that I've talked to a few people at Number 10 about this. They're not ducking this debate because they fear Ed Miliband. If anything, they want the juxtaposition in that direction to exist as much as it can between now and May. It's the idea that people don't really know who Nigel Farage is because he's not one of the two main party leaders. As soon as they see him and his geniality over the course of an hour and a half, that more voters
the
go.
Nick Clegg of the 2015 campaign.
Precisely that.
Word about a final minute, David Davis. I know that Linton Crosby and George Osborne are giving Mr. Cameron very strong advice. Don't do the debates. Are they right?
They may be right tactically. It's unavoidable. They've got to have the debate. It will happen. In an internet age, the broadcasters are controlled. The newspapers aren't, as we've seen with The Guardian and Telegraph proposing a debate. It'll happen, and like the LBC
but why
debate,
would he go on to an internet debate if he won't do a
well,
broadcast debate?
because the broadcasters will then cover that, just as they did with Farage versus Clegg. Farage versus Clegg, I think, was on LBC, and then it was on the national news that evening.
And the
that's
Guardian
what will happen.
Telegraph YouTube debate would be offered to the broadcasters.
And that's what will happen.
Yeah.
That's what will happen. It will get
think they
covered.
will?
It'll get covered.
So we'll get Chilcot and debates.
I think so. It's going to be an exciting year.
We're going to end on your optimistic note. Thank you. That's